Hello everyone, welcome to today's class. What we're going to be working on today are duration schedules and the command structure. What our objectives are going to be for today is number one, what is a duration schedule? And why do we learn it after the ratio and interval schedules? And how does it relate to our command structure? How can we apply it to make obedience easier? And how it can be used to teach the dog that you have their best interest in mind during the advanced training. So duration is going to be a measure of the time where a behavior continually occurs. So we do not want to get this confused with interval. All right. Interval and duration, I would say it is very common for trainers to get confused about what the difference between these are. An interval, what you need to remember, is just simply the measure of time between when reinforcement is available, but it doesn't have anything to do with the behavior itself as far as the behavior needing to be consistent between those intervals. So remember I gave an analogy last lecture about fishing, right? It's like you can go fishing, and even if it is the most super packed lake you have ever been to in your life, and every time you put your pole into the water, you're going to catch a fish. It does not mean that you need to be fishing consistently with your pole in the water the full 3 hours you're at the pond. It just, if you happen to be doing the behavior, you're going to get reinforcement consistently at whatever rate those fish are available. Another analogy that I like to make is with if you have parents that are taking a road trip with their children and they're going to give them a reward for good behavior. Suppose it is a 3-hour road trip and they say, if you are good, every 10 minutes, we're going to give you a little Reese's cup or a little piece of candy during the road trip. If they set a timer for every 10 minutes, and when the timer goes off, if they happen to be behaving when the timer goes off every 10 minutes, they're going to get a reward regardless if they were acting up before that timer went off. They just happen to be behaving the right way when that alarm goes off. That's when we're talking about pure interval. It's just like if you're doing the right behavior, when reward is available, we're talking interval. Duration is the concept that behavior must be consistent, basically, between a time period. So they set an alarm for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and if they were good the full 10 minutes, now they get the candy. All right. Now, I'm sure this is going to make a lot more sense when we start applying it over here to our training examples. So I'm going to start off with right away with simple. This is a video we did on last stream. Really easy, showing a duration. So a duration over here with Darcy, we're going to see is just I ask her to do a behavior, and if she maintains the behavior for a set amount of time, in this case it's just like a second or two, she then gets the reward. So watch this. Darcy, down. Good girl. Darcy, free. Girl. Darcy, heel. Good girl. Darcy, free. Good girl. All right, we got the idea here. Darcy, heel. Good girl. Darcy, free. Good girl. Okay. So these are very, very simple example of a duration. Now, the reason why we wanted to learn ratio and interval before this, so if this is someone's first time watching one of these streams, make sure you watch the two previous streams to get the most out of this. Since this is foundation style training, right? You learn by understanding concepts, certain concepts first as a foundation before you move to the next. And it makes you a better trainer. Is if we understand this whole idea between what a ratio is and what an interval is, it makes it easier for us to now play with what we can do with a duration. So for example, the same terminology that we learned during intervals and ratios, we do not have to relearn over here. For example, if we are just talking about duration schedules here now, you should all understand, for example, what a fixed duration schedule is, or a progressive duration schedule. So I'll give you an example, right? And this makes training really easy. Is a fixed duration schedule would be, we could do like a fixed duration schedule of just 1 second, which means if we tell a dog to sit and they're doing it for just 1 second, which is very easy for them to do, we could release the dog and give them a reward. And it's very easy to set them up for success with this. And then you can tell a client, or you can tell a client, just have the dog sit for 1 second, release them, they get a reward. Most dogs can do this. And then the client does, is doing a sit for 1 second, a down for 1 second, releasing. They cannot fail with this. Then you can tell them to go to a fixed 2 second duration. Have the dog sit, and as long as the dog sits for 2 full seconds, you can release them and get the reward. Now at this stage, if the dog did not sit for a full 2 seconds, for just like 1 second, you would just start back over. All right. I would just say, Darcy, sit, and start over if she popped up too early. Then you can always adjust and do like only 1.5 seconds, or you could try again for the 2 seconds. But that brings us to the progressive duration schedule. Right? If you're using a progressive duration schedule, it just means while you're doing the training, you're just progressively making the dog stay a little bit longer and longer. All right. Stay in the position, maintain that behavior longer and longer. We're doing 1 second, then we're doing 2 seconds. The dog's going good. You make the judgment. You keep increasing the amount of time. And now, of course, we have our variable schedules, right, where we can mix up, where we can mix up the time during the training. So if we were going to look at this on a chart like we've been doing, right? It's we already know this, all right? So we were last week when we were talking about doing compound schedules of reinforcement, where we were talking about how often reward is going to be available, and also, which was the interval, and also how often there was going to be a reward that was given, reinforcement was given, which was the ratio. Now, I kept it last week. We just did a vague, like each behavior. We were just working on each behavior for an equal amount of time. Like I put like 7 or 8 seconds, depending on how you want to interpret this. Now, duration is just simply now knowing that this is the duration. Is the time period that we want the dog to do it. So if we're talking about something like a progressive duration, all right, this 2 over here could be pushed back, right over here, then the 3 can be, you're adjusting the time between the behaviors that you want to do it. But if we are going to reward the dog for a duration, they would have had to have done the behavior between this whole time period in between. All right, between this whole time period in between, regardless of what was going on with your reward schedule over here that we have been working on. Okay. Now, I'm going to bring you over here. This was a video. This is Allie McCain over at Rogue Canine Academy. And she's a certified foundation style dog trainer. And we're going to bring a little bit of this to life inside of a training schedule that she, inside of a training session that she was doing with her dog Stormy over here. Now, what we're going to see, I'll just do a little bit of a clip, is what we're going to see is that she is going to be doing during the training that she's asking Stormy to do things, is she is going to be maintaining an interval schedule and also on a ratio. It's a compound. Everything that we learned about, we're going to see her communicating to Stormy and telling her she's doing right during the commands. But also what we're going to see going on is she's going to also be given rewards, reinforcement, after a duration. If Stormy has done the behavior for a certain amount of time, she's also going to be given her reinforcement for the duration. So let's watch a little clip over here. I'm going to put this about halfway through.
Sit. No. Good girl. Stormy.
Okay. So what we have is she asked Stormy to sit. And once she got Stormy to sit, she marked it, but then she said, good girl. And we had a consistent behavior. And then she released the dog from the command. And that was for a duration. And Stormy is getting reinforcement in the form of play over here. Now watch what happens. So we're going to have some play.
Stormy, heel.
Now we're having a new command.
No. Good girl.
She got the behavior.
Good job.
Now notice what we have here is she's now doing a new behavior and she's talking to the dog with markers, and she has on a fairly thin schedule where she's not given any primary rewards over here, all right? But she is marking. So she has Stormy within the command on an interval schedule of markers in the form of praise, but very thin on the ratio, meaning she's not getting anything within. She's relying mostly on the reward at the end of the duration. You know, when she's getting a behavior for a set amount of time, the dog is going to get a reward for a duration. Oh, I'm going wrong direction over here. Let's see.
Very good girl. Very good girl. Good. Good girl. Good.
Notice she gave a primary reward here, all right? So there was a lot of good girls. There was probably, 4 or 5 good girls before one, okay? So there's a reward schedule going on within the command itself.
Hi. Good girl. Good girl. Stormy, heel. Good girl. Good job. Good girl. Stormy, there. Good girl.
Okay. So notice during all those commands and even the change, this is what we were doing last week. And now I believe we get a separate type of reward coming up over here.
Stormy, turn around. Good girl. Stormy, down. No. Stormy, down. Good girl. Stormy, sit. No. Good girl. You getting tired, baby? Stormy, free. Good girl. Good girl. Good. Stormy, kill. Stormy, wait. Good.
Okay.
Good job. Stormy, there.
All right, good. So now we got some play going on mixed in there. And she ends the session, I think, over. She notices Stormy's getting a little burnt out over here. I think we get one more play.
Stormy, free.
There we go.
Good girl. All done.
All right, now what do we see having going on over here? Is I like this video, and I like reusing videos for certain purposes because we end up breaking it down more and more to understand what's going on. Is what we had over here is we should all be able to recognize what was going on within the commands, all right? Within the commands, that the dog was getting rewarded. But at the end, what we did see is sometimes Stormy was getting play after she completed a certain amount of exercises. All right. Now, a duration, what we're seeing here is what we called this was she was on a schedule, a variable duration schedule, a compound variable duration schedule, basically, where what Allie was doing was she was mixing up not only the length of time that she wanted Stormy to do a behavior before she would move on to the next behavior, but also the ratio in which Stormy was going to get a reward or reinforcement for doing the behavior, which was completely separate from what was going on within the commands, right? So you notice she was using some treats, some type of treat within the commands, but then Stormy was getting released to get some play, which is on a separate schedule. Now, what we call this is called a conjoint schedule, which means two separate schedules are being used to reinforce the same behavior. Now, as a professional trainer, I would personally never, I don't know, it's very rare unless you get you get those nerdy clients that they just like to learn new things and even the terminology. It's not the type of thing that you necessarily have to teach to a client, that this is a conjoint schedule. But what is important is that you're teaching them that you're teaching the client, that they're teaching the dog, that you have their best interest in mind. And that usually the best things that you're doing when you're going into advanced training is you're using more simple stimuluses, something like a treat, that the dog is going to get, or petting or love, often within the commands to encourage and reinforce the dog to do things. And then at the end of your durations, it is very useful to use activities that the dog would rather be doing, even if you were not doing a training session. Like if Allie just put Stormy into the yard, what would Stormy most rather be doing? She'd most rather be just playing, all right? Just playing with Allie. So what we have here is we use an activity as a reward at each duration. And the activity is basically what we call, usually, you don't have to use this, but in this case, it is Premack principle, all right? So Premack principle are using activities as reinforcers, and the activities are going to be things that the dog would rather be doing than the activity of obedience training, if that makes sense, all right? So you're doing your obedience training, and the dog is going to be like, all right, the dog's enjoying it, the dog is taking treats, but usually at the end of the duration, you want to do something that the dog probably wants more than the obedience training, and even sometimes the rewards that you're giving the dog within the training, like the treats. And now what we have is we're doing much more. If you understand interval, understand ratio, what you have now is you can do these much more complex reward schedules that are more than one working at once within the commands itself, and then also how often the dog has to do certain commands and for what amount of time in order to do something that they really like to do. And that's why on our chart over here, this is going to start to really make sense. All right. This is our dog training trinity. And the best way, I say this all the time, to get good at understanding how to use punishment in dog training is to get really good at learning what you can do with rewards and understanding how to motivate the dog and understanding how to get the dog to understand that you have their best interest in mind. Then punishment is even though this is a serious thing that you want to learn, it becomes minimal and it becomes you're using it mostly for corrections, meaning to show them what's right, which we get a hint of it in this video with Allie over here. Which shows us what we're going to be moving into next, where you hear her saying no to Stormy, which means wrong. All right. And don't worry about how to use the nose and things like that yet, because it becomes easy when you know all this other underlying things that we have going on over here. So watch what's going on over here. So now we're going to show little more advanced stuff in protection training, how this completely applies to protection training. And you can see, again, we're going to get a sense that the dog, in this case, we're going to show Orfeo, right? We're going to show Orfeo doing some protection training. I'll show a little bit of another dog doing some protection training. And we are going to see intervals and we're going to see durations and we're going to get this. And we're also going to see that we have Premack principle over here. So just going back and forth to our charts, look at what this looks like. All right. So when we're teaching concepts, this is why we have it in this order. If we understand our ratios, we understand how dogs learn the quickest and our continuous reward schedules and how to teach them quickly. But then we also should know that how not to be using tons and tons of treats and thin out these ratios. It's not just treats, it's toys, it's whatever type of reward. When we understand this concept, right, we go into our interval, all right, how often this is going to be available and how to combine these together. And then that brings us to duration, which then allows us to take advantage of Premack principle, which really helps us get the most out of our phase 1 training. Over here, let's see, we got look at that. I guess I should have just let here are some clips from Bike Club a few years back, and here goes Orfeo, good old Orfeo with Judy. Now watch, everything should become more clear at this point. What is going on is we're going to see Judy talking to Orfeo, and she's going to be giving him verbal, all right, markers within the command. He's not going to be interested in treats, and it's not going to be recommended to give treats during bite work, right? When they're barking and biting, we don't want things going down the wrong way. He's probably not going to take it anyway. But she could continue to use that communication that the dog learns in earlier training. And then after durations of doing the behavior, he gets to do what he would rather be doing, which is a breed-specific behavior, right? So he's from strong working lines, and he loves, you don't have to tell him to do anything to want to bite a person, all right? Like, he's going to want to do that anyway. So his rewards for durations at whatever schedule is we choose during these training sessions is going to be to actually bite. But there's a separate reward schedule going on to encourage him to keep doing the right behavior within. So let's watch some of this.
Good boy. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Good boy.
So you hear commands, we hear the good boys, we hear the praise within. Since it's thinned out, all right, this is Since these have been thinned out, he does not need treats during these commands, but he's understanding that he's doing the right thing, especially when we have some things going on that he would rather be doing.
Good boy.
Good, pet him up.
All right. So what we had here is after a duration, he did what, two commands. So what we have here is he's getting, he's on a schedule, a duration schedule, which here he had to do about 2 commands. I think it was 2 or 3 commands before he was getting rewarded within on a separate reward schedule. But then he was rewarded after like a second duration with able to do what he really wants to do, an activity, the activity of fighting someone. Now also notice, even within this activity, Judy is going to give him reinforcement. Very important when it comes to people, when you get like police dog trainers and working dog trainers, there is a huge issue with conflict, right? Where the dog associates the handler coming over with just, oh, this handler is coming over just to make me release or just to correct me because it wants me to do another behavior. What we have here is we're building communication that lets the dog know that they're constantly doing right, all right? We're letting them know that they're doing right and that we have their best interest in mind. And it's built off of a foundation where when the dog obeys, it is not mainly about if you don't obey, you're going to get punished. It is mainly about if you obey, you're going to get more of what you want. Trust me, all right? That's what they're telling. I mean, trust me when I tell you that you're telling the dog to trust you, all right? So that is what's going on here. So see, Judy's going to come over here.
Good, so be ready when she's wandering.
All right, so we have our markers, we have our good boys, and then she was also given physical affection. He feels her back there, and he knows she is happy that he's doing that, all right? Now, he's in protection mode. So what this means is that command to Orfeo just means you're going to fight. He could fight however he wants. He's going to listen, and even though this stream isn't about protection, this was based mostly off of the instinct to protect Judy. So she moves away from him and she yells. He's going to act how he's supposed to act within this command, within the bite command. So she's going to leave.
Okay.
Good boy.
So make sure she doesn't get caught in the crossfire. He's been a little... Good. Nice bite. Good, wander away. So what happens is after, I would do a formal recall for him, Judy, and then John will get a chance to turn around. So get back up more. Good. There we go. He's good. Nice.
Good boy. Good boy.
Oh boy.
Good boy.
So now what we see here with Orfeo, as you see, is he's getting rewards within, and then she gave him another command, right? She told him, Orfeo, come, which is the start of a new command. And now this is there's a compound schedule going on here for the, within the commands and each separate command. So here she called him in a recall, and since he knows he knows that she has his best interest in mind, that during the recall he was immediately rewarded with the presentation of another bite and another chance to do protection. I believe over here he gets called to do obedience again. Let's say.
The only technique we've ever found out.
Good. So you'll be the reward bite.
Orfeo, come. Good buddy. Orfeo, heel.
Good. Are you ready, Josh? Good. Make sure he's focused on the right guy. And don't point at me or Carlos.
All right. So now we see he was released from a bite. And again, let me shrink this a bit. See what's going on. Okay. So he's being asked to do behaviors. He's getting the first time that we did this with him. Maybe I could even go to the board. It'd be easier over here. All right. Is he was asked to do a couple of commands before he went to bite. All right. And then within the bite, he was getting rewarded within the commands. All right. Now, after his first bite, right? So after his first bite, when he was asked to do another command to come, he was able to do another bite right away. This is variable. The power of the variable reward schedule that we learned is very powerful because they cannot predict it, but he ultimately knows we has our best interest in mind. Then when he was called away from the second bite for a recall, we see Judy over here, she did, it looks like 3 commands, like a recall, a heal, and it looks like a sit, and rewards within, all right? So then after a good duration, she's satisfied with whatever duration that he wants to hold a command. We go back over here. We have he does a sit, and then we get, one more bite. And then a down. It's another bite. All right.
Nice.
And then ultimately within this bite, I think this was the last one of the session. We called it a remote.
Love him up.
We called it a reward bite.
Whoa.
Where? Let me turn my secondary loud voice over here. He ends up just getting a total slip of the suit here. And the end of the session, where he just gets to feel totally satisfied.
I'll slip it soon.
So he slips it. And he just gets lots of love. And he feels victorious.
Good job.
And the session ends. So what we have is a protection session that is based off of rewards at a schedule, encouragement, rewards. And at no point during the whole training session did the dog ever feel like Judy did not have his best interest in mind. All right. At this point. And this is, and I don't even know if there was any punishment even involved in that training session. And if it's hard to tell, right? Because there's so much reward going on. And we're going to get to the punishment sides of things, but you're going to see in advanced training, if you understand the smaller concepts, punishment will be in the form of correction, meaning to fix, to help, just to show them that they made a mistake. All right. It's rarely in it's 99% of the time, especially with the finished dogs in the process, it's used to help, to correct, that sort of stuff. I'll show you one more clip over here just to show again duration just applied to different concepts. All right, over here, this was just, I was just filming a day of a bike club. There was a client teaching his dog how to escort someone with him not present, to basically follow an agitator. And during the following process, during the command itself, the handler is going to encourage his dog within the intervals and the markers. Just kind of watch what's going on over here.
We're mixing up communication. So with him, we're working on basically an escort. Tell the dog just to follow him. First bite him. The dog wants to bite him, so.
And what's interesting here is he's looking for a certain duration. Now with these exercises, we could now speak the same language, right? When we would teach a dog to do an escort, to follow someone, generally we do a progressive duration schedule, starting at literally like 1 second of the dog following the person correctly. And then we ask the dog to follow the person longer and longer. And we ask the handler to encourage the dog and let the dog know that they're doing well by praising the dog, at proper interviews and intervals. And all of these can be thinned out a lot as we get further along in the training. Now there, the dog bit the agitator before he was supposed to, but the handler was able to just start over from the beginning with the dog because the dog is looking for a fight. So when he bit, the agitator didn't move. The dog knows he usually gets a much better fight if he waits to the proper duration. But again, watch the handler. Try to listen in on the handler over here. I'll turn up the volume.
It's a lot of communication.
That's just trained from like to deal with someone else, just to go away from you.
Sort of. Hey, good. We break down the pretty close command.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so the
as
dog
we
gets
teach
a
follow,
reward.
usually we
Dog's
start-
getting a
we
slip of the
follow
sleeve.
person, with the dog.
And then
the behavior we're looking for. See, like with the dog before this, we were looking for
then he's going to repeat the exercise.
bark and loose leash. Here, it's also two behaviors. It's focused on the guy's arm
So,
and move with them. It's two behaviors without jumping the gun. It's a dead agitator. If it's a dog, it's not going to be rewarding to him.
so listen to the handler. This was a client.
Because the dogs that they want to fight, the Malinois, the German Shepherd.
Dog's getting a duration of a down
kind of
first.
Like playing fetch with a dog. The part they like about it is chasing it when it's moving. The thing with the agitator, the thing they like is
And then the dog
once the guy is dead, not
will
moving,
get the behavior. He's asked to do the behavior of follow, but for a certain duration.
Good.
Hear the praise.
Stop and go whenever. Good boy.
I'd give it to him.
Brody, get him.
Good. Good. Right there, pet him. That was really good.
And I just love seeing owners bonding with their dog doing this stuff. All right. And so what this brings us to is I'm going to bring us back to the top over here to go over some points over here. So we're still studying this first half of the command structure over here. All right. Now you notice in everything that we saw here, it is still started. Behaviors, new behaviors always start with the name. All right. And it could be a release from the command, which could sometimes lead into a Premack principle reward. I mean, you're doing obedience with the dog, and it could be a release, meaning do whatever you want. Choose your own reward. All right. Go lay down, go take a nap, go sniff the grass, do whatever you want. Or it could be something that you direct them to do something that they want to do probably anyway, like to go bite in those cases. Now, when the dog obeys, we show the praise. That's the marker, right? We know what that is, all right? So we have the marker that the dog learns. And now within the command, the dogs are on a variable schedule. You notice that? They get praised for doing it, and right away they're on a variable schedule. Good boy, you're doing a good job. Depending on what you're doing, you could throw in a treat. During, you can you could pet the dog. But now this is the new part over here. Did the dog stay? All right. Notice we're not saying stay. You can give a command, which means physically stop moving, which you saw Allie do actually in her video. I think she gave a wait command or something where the dog just stopped. But every command is a stay. Stay within the command, but you don't have to say it. And that's where the duration is, all right? So generally, at this stage, if you got what you want, you got the dog to remain within the command for the amount of time that you wanted the dog to do the command, you then, yes, all right, if we get yes, we then can go back to the start, say the dog's name, then either give another command depending on your whole separate duration schedule, how many commands you're going to give and how often you want them to do it. Or you can release the dog to do whatever they want, or command, like to bite, all right? And so this shows us, and this is where Premack principle usually falls into play, or it can mean another command. But everything you need to know about phase one is in this circuit that we have over here, all right? Every place where it deviates, where it says, did the dog stay? And it says no, all right? This is if the dog wasn't doing it long enough and the dog doesn't do it. When we go into phase two, we can talk about ways to correct, show the dog what is right, all right? And it could happen over here while the dog is doing the command, or it could happen when you initially give the dog command, you see? These are the two ways you veer off from this cycle. But when you're just teaching phase one, anytime that the dog does not do no, you don't go that way. You basically just start over. That's all you need to remember. That's all you need to teach the client. You just start over. The dog messes up. They're not going to get the reward. You just start over. And you make it easier for the dog to succeed, and you adjust your reward schedules, you adjust your environment to make things easier for you. That's where establishing operations comes into place, right? Establishing operations is really anything that you do to make your motivators, the reason why you want your dog to do the behaviors you want, more motivational. So the classic one is if we're just doing phase one and we want the dog to learn and pay attention and be successful, if we're using treats, if the dog is hungrier than normal before you fed him breakfast, it makes the treats more motivational. But remember, establishing operations could also be what you do to the training environment. So we're working with a client and we're teaching. Sometimes the yard, the dog may be too distracted because there's things to sniff out there. Let's see what squirrels or groundhogs crossed the yard this morning, where you can bring them into the house, into the kitchen or something like that. If you're doing group classes and you're doing puppy classes, right? Sometimes simply spreading out the puppies on the further sides of the room or putting or using blinds to give visual barriers between the dogs, right? Can establish operations to make the treat more motivational to the dog because they're less stimulated by everything else, right? And this helps. So these are just tricks to help us stay in phase one training, the phase one part of the command structure over here. Okay. So let's see if we hit our objectives for today's lecture, shall we? What is a duration schedule? Okay, so review. Duration schedule is the measure of time, right? We expect the dog to do a behavior continuously before they're going to get reinforcement, all right? Why do we learn it after ratio and interval? If we don't, we would have to give, right? We'd have to give reinforcement to the dog after every time, right? They did a command, right? If you don't understand the idea of ratios, that you do not have to reward them after every single duration, right? We don't have a lot of room to really play around with if we don't understand that sort of concept, right? And it's going to be harder to encourage them even within the command if we do not understand the concepts of interval. So that's why we want to learn ratio and interval before the duration. How does it relate to our command structure? It just showed you, right? It's over here. It's did the dog stay, right? We ask the dog to do something. If they do it, we want to praise them and we want to reward them, encourage them within. And it's this whole concept. Did the dog do it for the amount of time that you wanted the dog to do it consistently before we move on to the next command or we give the reward? How can we apply it to make obedience easier, right? So if we understand this concept, we could go really simple. It's simple exercises. You can do 1 second durations, right? And do progressively get better, progressively easier. The same reason it makes ratio and interval, understanding those make obedience easier, is when you can visualize this, you can put it on the paper, you can troubleshoot, you can make things easier. It gives you more options. It allows you to be able to create. And last but not least, is how can we use it to teach the dog that you have their best interest in mind during advanced training? What do all dogs want? What do we want? We truly work hard in life so we could enjoy the finer things in life that we would rather be doing. All right. And often what's kind of cool, similar to dogs, is sometimes the things that we have to do is closely connected to the things that we enjoy, right? So if you're a professional trainer, you may enjoy your work. You might want to be doing it anyway, and if you're getting paid for it. And the cool thing with the obedience is if you teach the dog the right way, they do enjoy the obedience. You want them to enjoy the obedience within the obedience, and then still teach them you have their best interest in mind by, through that obedience, using the duration, understanding Premack principle, that you incorporate the activities that they really want to do into the obedience. And we are creating, right? The obedience is really now about creating that relationship with the dog. It's an integral part of your relationship with the dog, and about making them happy. And it's built upon our foundation, right, of cynopraxis, where if we always go into the training with not only the owner's happiness in mind, making their life better, also making the dog's life better, you naturally get better results. It is not just about being self-righteous, right? Like, oh, I'm going to use, more rewards than punishment because I'm really nice. It actually makes sense that you're going to get better results when you're looking out for the dog's best interest and what makes them happy. Okay. So that's what I got for you guys today. Remember, highly encourage anyone, if they want to get the most out of this lecture, is to please, at the very least, watch the lecture on ratio schedules within the command structure and interval schedules within the command structure. And then this lecture should be cake to you. It should be pretty clear to you. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I'll be back on Wednesday for Q&A. Oh, let me see if you guys have any major questions here. Nope. I think we're good. All right. Good night. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody.